So what exactly is construction engineering inspection? That's just the administration of a project. So again, you are, once we've gotten through the bid phase and we are into construction, that's the subject we're talking about now. You've gotten through design, we've gotten through the letting phase. Some public entities have their own in-house staff. City of Baton Rouge is usually big enough they can do their own inspection. City of New Orleans, things like that. But if you're a smaller municipality, you are probably hiring a consultant to do the CE&I for you. This is what we're talking about, the administration of the project. We are constructing it per the plans and specs. We are generating estimates, change orders, things like that to progress the project. We're doing our sampling and testing, all of those requirements that are included in that CFR, that are included in your specifications. That's what we're working on. So typically, y'all are using federal dollars for non-state routes. Typically the department, DOTD, is responsible for state roadways, so this is usually your own local roadways, enhancements, things like that y'all are wanting. So again, use an in-house staff, hire a consultant. You can either hire them directly or utilize DOTD to help you procure that, going through our contracts section. Just general overview for today. Again, we're going to go over project setup, or this mini session of mine before we get into the site manager session. We'll go over project setup, pre-construction conference, the actual construction admin, and then a little bit of project closeout. Like I said before, we'll go into greater detail later today on all of these various issues. But just, following that setup, that's kind of how we're going to go through it. And then we got our first question. So barnacles, second row. So when should a project setup meeting be held? So I just kind of went over the agenda. So the order that we're going in probably makes sense, maybe. Are we doing it before the project bids, prior to the pre-construction meeting, or after the pre-construction meeting? Prior to pre-construction.
Everybody agrees?
Y'all all agree with that?
B?
All right. That is correct. So y'all are already paying attention to the agenda. The project setup was right before the pre-construction. This is, of course, after the letting. So that's where we're wanting to hold this project setup meeting. So your next question is, what is a project setup meeting? Well, this is for the responsible charge with the entity, your LPA CEI consultant, also our folks, the DOTD project coordinator, should be attending this. But basically, this is your meeting before the meeting. Before you meet with the contractor, it's a good idea to hold this project setup meeting to go over all the details of your particular contract. So again, who should attend, responsible charge, consultant PE, our project coordinator, lab engineer if we are performing the testing for y'all. Again, that's in your entity state agreement. ESA, we'll use that acronym a lot as well. So make sure you're aware of who's responsible for what, because you want to know that before you get to this pre-construction conference and start talking to your contractor, and he's wanting to know, all right, well, where are the samples going? How quickly should we be getting those back? That sort of thing. So when do you have this meeting? Again, before the pre-construction conference, but after your notice of contract execution. So once a project is let, you go through, you have to award it. It goes to the city and the contractor for them to sign the contract. Because remember, this contract is between the entity and the contractor typically. It's not a contract that DOTD holds. It's one that the entity holds themselves. So we'll kind of get into why certain things are a little bit later in the site manager talk, because y'all are actually listed as the contractor on there because we're paying y'all. But This is when you set that up. We are supposed to get a notice to proceed out as soon as possible. That's what the specification says. So once you have a contract execution, we're supposed to be issuing that notice to proceed as soon as possible. We internally, with our construction administration document, says you've got 30 days to get that notice to proceed issued. The specification allows for 60 days. If you're going past the 30 days, you're supposed to actually ask my boss, Brian Owens, if that's okay, and the reason behind why we're doing it out to 60 days. But 60 days is the cutoff for notice to proceed, so be aware of that. If you've gone past that, technically you're breach of contract with your contractor. We have had issues before when a notice to proceed wasn't issued. They've come back, requested additional funds because we didn't get started as quickly as they were anticipating, things like that. We've had to terminate some projects because of this, so be aware that you really need to adhere to the specifications, because if we're not following that, we're technically in breach of contract. But have this meeting prior to the pre-construction with the contractor, with the parties involved. You'll go over your roles and responsibilities so that everybody's aware who does what, right? Responsible charge needs to do this. C&I consultant, PE, inspectors need to be doing this. Project coordinator, construction coordinator will be doing this, right? Again, go over your legal documents. Like I said, we're gonna have a lot of repetition. You're gonna hear entity state agreement probably 400 times today. So again, make sure you know what's in there. It's very difficult to administer a project if you don't know what you're responsible for. We don't want to get halfway through a project, 3/4 of a way through a project, and go, oh, I thought DOTD was taking care of that. Well, no, in your entity state agreement it says you're going to take care of that. So that's why we want to make sure you are aware of it, have reviewed it, know it front and back, sleep on it at night, gather it through osmosis, whatever your learning strategy is, you want to do that. The construction contract, make sure you go over that. So of course your plans are part of that, but the specifications as well. You might have special provisions in there that are specific to your project. A lot of times also entities, y'all have some technical specifications for project specific things that y'all want. If you're dealing with water, sewer, lighting, things like that are specific to your entity, y'all have a certain specification already in place. DOTD doesn't really do water and sewer, right? We do drainage, we do roadways, we do things like that. We don't really do water and sewer as well. So, if you're utilizing your specification, make sure you've read through it, it makes sense, the pay items are correct, all that sort of stuff. This thing squeaks a lot. Try not to move. C&I inspection guidelines, again, you can go through the contract administration manual. It's a good tool to let you know this is kind of how DOTD administers projects, to make sure that we are in compliance with the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations. Make sure you read through your contract for your compliance goals. What's your DBE goal percentage? Make sure you understand payroll submittal, those requirements, subcontractor submittals, approvals, all that sort of stuff. Again, that's part of the compliance section later on, but make sure you're familiar with that. Again, sample plan, make sure you know what you need to sample, how often it needs to be sampled. We do have a sample manual. It's online. It kind of goes over all those different things, how often we're supposed to get an embankment sample, how often we're supposed to do a density test, how often we've got to do concrete, all those different things. We got to check concrete, we got to check aggregate, cement, any additives, and anything, and everything is in that sample manual. So make sure you're kind of familiar with that, because you have to set up a sample plan prior to the pre-construction that you're going to give the contractor based on the quantities in your contract. We are expecting this many samples so that they know.
Has that ever been formalized, or are people still printing out the 2059 report preemptively and submitting that?
So It's kind of different for each district. I know, and y'all might not be familiar with our district setup, but District 02 and District 08, that's Alexandria and New Orleans. The lab engineer does the sample plan for them. And then every other district, it's the responsibility of the project engineer to go through and set up that sample plan. We have some tools in place. We're utilizing a program called Headlight now for our inspection. There's also a sample plan portion of that. There's training online for that. We've got a YouTube page where you can go and take a look at that to help set up those sample plans. It makes the sampling easier on your inspector later on once you get all that set up. But yeah, there is online versions. So it's not just print out the sample plan, hand it to the contractor and say, here's your sample plan, good luck. You know, we prefer for it to be formalized and actually show this is how many tests we're going to be, or how many samples we're going to be taking. So again, make sure you're aware of the QA/QC testing. Who's doing the testing? The certified lab. So again, in your ESA, that will say whether or not it's DOTD doing the work or if it is, if you need to get your own certified lab. Ultimately, if I recall correctly in all the ESAs, the language in there says it's ultimately the responsibility of the entity. However, the district, if they have availability, usually are very willing to do the testing for y'all. The only caveat to that is when you have those TS specs where it changes maybe some of the testing requirements, some of those sampling requirements, and we aren't set up for that. So water and sewer, we're not really set up to do those kind of tests. If you have specific things, say you changed a concrete spec, you have your own patching concrete specification that you want to utilize, then maybe the testing isn't quite right because you changed up the gradation. You're not using our standard BDE concrete mix. You've created your own gradation, so they're not able to perform those tests because they're only set up, and the system is only set up, you know, rigidly to kind of perform those tests based on our specifications and our gradations. Go over your pre-construction checklist. So we do have that online for y'all to utilize. Make sure you're familiar with that, the things that you go over with the contractor before you actually get in there with them and go over it. The progress schedule and approval, you will not have gotten this yet. That comes from the contractor, but just realize that y'all are responsible for reviewing the schedule, making sure it makes sense, approving it, as well as any updates, things like that that the contractor might send in. So as you can see, there's a lot of things to go over before you even get into the pre-construction conference. So again, we're still in project setup. Want to go over work zone inspections, make sure you know what you're doing on your job, how y'all need to set up the lane closures that might be required, what lane restrictions y'all might have, you know, as a contractor, only allowed to work at night or on weekends or whatever the case may be. Again, that's in your special provisions, should be in there. Final audit checklist, that's, as you mentioned before, the 2059. We've changed the name of that slightly because 2059 was a term because it was an actual form, 2059. We've started calling it the audit of testing and materials because that's really what it is at the end of the job. You're going back and making sure, yep, we got all of our samples, we got all of our passing tests, and it's just an audit of all that information. But there's a checklist for that. Make sure you know how to do partial estimates and change orders in the system. Again, that you're set up in the system. This is when you need to definitely make sure everyone that is going to be involved on the project is set up in Site Manager, Headlight, Civil Rights and Labor, which is CR&L. You know, there's various programs that we use. There's a traffic control diary program. Make sure that you have the right user access for all those and that you have contract authority. So you make sure all those things are in place. Mary kind of went over this. Again, we're going to, you know, repeat. But roles and responsibilities of the DOTD project engineer. So this is, or the project coordinator, DOTD project coordinator. We are not the project engineer. It typically is a project engineer from one of our offices in the district. They are there to help. They are there for technical support. They are not there to do the inspection and the contract admin for you. You are still responsible for that. So make sure, you understand their role, your role, that sort of thing. They are a tool to, bounce things off of. Hey, look, entity state agreement again. So again, we're going to talk about it. This is the written signed agreement. It's the legal document between DOTD and the entity. Talks about, again, how we're going to disperse the funds, if it's a reimbursement and a disbursement. I know Venice goes into that very thoroughly later on, but understand, put that in the back of your mind, reimbursement versus disbursement. So that's the funding provisions, responsibilities of each party. I mentioned that as well. Who's responsible for what? Are y'all doing the sampling, and then do y'all have to get the testing lab, or will we provide that? Just go through that and make sure all of those things are there. Make yourself familiar with it. The construction contract, again, that's your contract between entity and actual prime contractor. States how you're going to be paying them based on the provisions of the contract. Is it, it's based on quantities, square yards, cubic yards, linear foot. Make sure you're familiar with all those different item types and how they are measured and paid. The different obligations. Remember that we are all under not just the CFR requirements, but Louisiana revised statutes. So we are required to pay a contractor within 30 days after the invoice comes due. So if you set your pay estimate up for the calendar month, you start on the 1st, you end on the 30th or the 31st, you need to be generating that estimate as soon as possible so it can go through those approval process and we can get the contractor paid 30 days after that comes due. So just be aware of that. It's the responsibility of the entity to make sure the contractor gets paid. Whether it's a reimbursement or a disbursement, if something gets hung up, there's some paperwork wrong, it's ultimately the responsibility of the entity to make sure the contractor gets paid for the work that they performed. This is just kind of what makes up a contract. Again, you've got the standard specs, supplemental specs, special provisions. Included with the standard specs is the material sampling manual. It kind of goes over, your sampling schedule, the frequency, all that. So make sure you're aware of all these. Again, standard plan is what was originally done. We talk about the purple book. Most of your projects at this point should be purple book projects. The modifications that have been made since the purple book came out, because it was 2016, are your supplemental specs. So it changes some of the things from standard specs. So make sure you're aware of those. And then special provisions are contract specific. So, this is over this is over this. So make sure you're aware of that, if you've got a conflict somewhere, the special provision, if it tells you, to paint the sidewalk black, but the standard spec says paint it gray, well, your special provision takes precedence over that, so make sure you're aware of that. All right, so again, just, this is what the Purple Bible looks like. I don't think we're printing these anymore, but of course you can find it online. I actually find that to be better because you can do a Control F and actually look for the information you want to find. But the same is true for our supplemental specs. It's not a orangey looking book. It's just online as well. So make sure, again, it should be tucked in with your contract, but if you can't find it in your contract, it is available online, the supplemental specs, just as a, just lanyap on top of this. Your section 502 specs from the standard specs, every bit of that got modified and as a supplemental spec. So, if you're talking about asphalt and how to sample it and all that information, that got modified and it's in a supplemental spec. So if you have asphalt on the job, be aware of that the supplemental spec is taken over. And then lastly, special provisions. So again, just applied to each individual project. Typically, when we make a modification to a spec, it comes in as a special provision for it's either 3 to 6 months, somewhere in there, before it then moves on and gets put in as a supplemental spec. But when we first implement a spec change, we want to draw everybody's attention to it, contractors, y'all, the PEs, that sort of thing. So it goes in as a special provision to kind of get your attention. The sample plan or the sampling manual, again, you can find that online. It's a pretty robust document. Again, it goes over all the frequencies for the various items that you might have in your contract and breaks it down, kind of like I mentioned before, concrete. You'll have a bunch of different tests associated with concrete because you're going to check the aggregate that's going in there. You're going to check the cement that's going in there. You're also going to do compressive tests. If it's a structural element, you're going to check resistivity. So there's a lot of different things associated, say, with one concrete element that you might need to be checking. So again, make sure you're familiar with that, or your CE&I consultants, make sure y'all are familiar with it. All right, I believe shellbacks.
For the shellbacks.
All right.
Third row.
So the first order precedence. So what trumps everything else in the grand scheme of things? Special.
Sure.
Special provisions, that is correct.
Yep.
So in the spec book, because nobody's perfect, everybody makes mistakes, there might be some conflicts between the standard spec and the plans, or our standard plans, all those sort of things that have your your details, things like that. So in section 10504 of the specifications, it goes over the precedents. So if there is a conflict anywhere in there between the plans or anything else, special provisions is the number one thing. That's over the plans, then the plans are over supplemental specs, standard specs, and then last falling in line is the standard plans. That's your details, your standard details that we include. All right, again, we'll kind of go over these in more depth later on, but understand what DBE is. That's Disadvantaged Business Enterprise. This is part of the compliance program. There's typically, with any federal dollars, we are required to utilize the DBE process and make sure we are including some percentage of disadvantaged business as well as small business. That's the next slide. But for historic purposes where certain groups have been discriminated and or held out of projects, this is to implement them, include them. So again, small business isn't necessarily a disadvantaged business, not a DBE. So you can see here, it's race neutral, but understand kind of the difference between the two. They'll go over that later, but be aware what's in your contract and what those percentage requirements are. The contractor is required to meet those goals, so be sure that you're tracking that and making sure that yes, they are on track, or if you've changed quantities, you've changed something in the plans, whatever the case may be, and now they had intended for this DBE to do that work, and now that DBE can't do that work because you've removed that work from the job or you modified it or whatever. We do need to try to still meet that goal. Just because we delete something, remove something that was supposed to have been done, we're still supposed to meet that DBE goal. So the department has an overall goal each year that we are trying to meet. So your particular job might not have the full state requirement. I don't remember what it is this year. Is it 17%?
I think something like that.
So you might have 10%, 8%, something like that based on your location, the items that are in the contract, things like that, because the DBEs are usually fairly specialized. They might just be doing guardrail work, or they might just be doing pipe work, things like that. So if you don't have some of those on there, the DBE goal that gets set is usually a little lower because they're not available. I mentioned this before, contract administration manual. It's kind of your how-to. It's how we go through and make sure we're administering projects correctly. Again, it's very broad, it's general, it's not project specific, so of course there's always differences for each project, but be aware, this is kind of how we administer. We are actually going through a modification to that as well. I know Mary mentioned the LPA document manual needs to be updated. We're actually updating our construction administration manual as well. So we're in the process of that. It's online. When we post a new one, it'll be on there as well. Site manager, everybody's favorite contract admin tool. So as you can see, this is very Windows 3.1 based, cutting edge technology. We've been using it since I started with the department back in '06. I think we actually started utilizing it in '04. But this is currently what we're using to administer our contract admin. This is where we do our pay estimates. This is where we do change orders. This is where daily work reports are housed. I say all that to then say we are moving away from site manager. We are using Headlight right now for our inspection purposes. That's where we're doing our daily work reports, and those daily work reports get pulled back into site manager. We're currently working with Headlight right now to create the contract admin software to do estimates and change orders. So, the training associated with site manager will eventually be obsolete and will just be Headlight only. That's kind of a relief for us. I know this is not the most user-friendly program in the world, but we are trying to get into the 21st century with some actual technology. So understand that yes, we are still using this for now, but beginning of the year we're supposed to be rolling out for DOTD projects the use of Headlight. We're going to start piloting it towards the end of the year to make sure the estimates and change orders are working properly, and then eventually it'll roll over to consultant jobs and y'all as well. So again, daily work reports, diaries, monthly pay estimates, change orders, all that's housed in Site Manager. We'll go over this in detail later, but there is a difference between a daily work report, a DWR, and a diary. I'll go over that, like I said, later. At the beginning of the project, you must be set up in Site Manager. So this is what holds up a lot of the contract admin is, the CE&I consultant, project engineer wasn't set up yet, the inspector wasn't set up yet, or if they are set up, they didn't get contract authority, those sort of things. So make sure, again, at that project setup meeting, you're making sure that you are all set up in the system, you're good to go, your inspectors are signed on, all of that, so that when the project's up and running and you go in to try to do a daily work report, and it's not there, why can't I get access? Oh, well, you don't have contract authority. That's a little different. The department, we don't know, even though, yes, you signed a contract, I don't know that, John Doe is the project engineer. I don't know that Jane Doe is the inspector. Y'all have to let us know that so you can contact our e-construction team. They'll be happy to set y'all up. And again, I'll go over the setup stuff a little bit later. So inspection requirements. Inspectors have to be on the job site during construction activities by the contractor. If it's a pay item that they are working on, inspector has to be there. They got to make sure they are building that per the plans, per the specifications, that we're sampling and testing, doing all those things. So the inspector also needs to be certified. These are the various certification areas that we have within the department. So if they are doing embankment and base course, and we're of course needing to run density test on that, your inspector needs to be certified in embankment base course that's running that density machine. That's not to say that you can't have qualified inspectors. Qualified inspectors, certified inspectors are two different things. Qualified just means, yes, they know what to do on a job, but like, pipe. Pipe doesn't have a specific certification. They can watch and put in the pipe. Now the backfill has to have density run, so you need somebody certified to do that. But, there's no certification for striping. There's no certification for erosion control, things like that. You can have an inspector out there saying, yep, they put up silt fence, that's easy enough. They put up hay bales, those sort of things. But certified inspector has to be out there for, these sort of specific things. Other qualifications, so again, they might not have a certification, but if they have been qualified in sampling and testing, specifically the one I usually talk about is concrete. So, when we're pouring concrete, they need to be out there taking a sample of the concrete, making the cylinders. You've got to put a third in, rod it, another third, rod it, another third, rod it, strike it off, all right? Well, there is a qualification that goes with that. It's not a certification, but it is a qualification. So understand that if they are, making those cylinders, they need to be qualified, but it's not necessarily a certification. Another good one to have is the TCT TCS. That's your traffic control technician, traffic control supervisor. We typically make all of our inspectors have it just so they're aware of the requirements on a job, make sure everybody's safe. This is, the number one thing. I'm sure y'all saw here recently, we had a MAP truck driver get hit. He had everything set up properly, everything was done correctly, and he still got hit. So we want to make sure contractors safe, contract workers are safe, y'all are safe, traveling public is safe. So the more you know, the more you can call out, hey, you don't have the right barricades up, you don't have the right taper, we need more information in front of this lane closure, whatever the case may be. So we want to make sure this is one of those extremely, extremely important issues. All right, next question.
The urchins.
So certified inspector in embankment is required to inspect during the installation of silt fencing. Is that true or false?
What do you guys think?
Can we answer it and get their go home?
No. Hey. What do you think?
All right, I'm going false. That is correct.
Good job.
So silt fencing is not embankment, that's just erosion control stuff. So again, not certified inspector is not required for that. So inspection requirements, again, QR code. This is where you can go to get information on getting trained, being certified. Certification requires a written test, a performance evaluation, and experience. So just understand, yes, you may have a qualified inspector. I just got done telling you he's got to be certified to be out there on embankment. Well, you can have a qualified and a certified out there together so that the qualified technician at least gets experience so that he can meet the certification requirements.
Don't forget bullet one.
Yes. A registered engineer is not the same as a certified inspector. So I am a registered engineer. I am not certified to take density requirements. I was qualified to make cylinders when I was a project engineer. That has since lapsed because again, certifications, qualifications are not lifetime achievements. They are time sensitive. I think it's 4 years that you got to get recertified. So I had taken the test when I was in the district to make sure that when I'm making a concrete cylinder, contractor doesn't come back and say, those weren't, created correctly, because they had a low break, and we're going to end up throwing that out because I, as the project engineer, made it. Make sure that, you are certified to do those things if you're going to perform them. Traffic control supervisor. So understand the contractor has to have their TCS out there. They are responsible for lane closures, traffic control, your warning signs, all that sort of stuff. That's their responsibility. They must have a TCS. That TCS is supposed to inspect the job twice a day, once in the morning, once in the afternoon. They're filling out the traffic control diaries that then y'all are verifying that they have created, saying what's out there, how many barrels, how many cones. We did this in accordance with TC07, all those different things. That's what the contractor is responsible for, but make sure they are putting that person out there so that, we're all abiding by the information, and again, that we're all safe. Now, the TCS might be a regular laborer. He will come out, he'll set up the lane closure, and then he might go to, if they're doing asphalt paving, something like that, he's with the road crew, which is perfectly fine, but he has to be available to go correct any deficiencies. So understand that, that's all in the specifications, but be aware of that as well. They can, be doing other work, but if you tell them, hey, we got a problem over here, they have to go and correct it.
Is that a proper flagger taker right there?
It actually, yes, it does look proper. Now, I don't know what sort of signs they have up in advance of this, but they'll go through that, I know, in a little bit. But he's, standing there with the sign out. He's not in the middle of the roadway where he's going to get run over. The cones are tapered to force them over, that sort of thing. So, yes, he's not sitting down. He's not just, flipping this back and forth. He's not on his phone. There's not a taper there so that people see it. You don't necessarily have to use barrels or super cones depending on the traffic situation. So the smaller cones there are admissible, I guess. That sounds more like a legal term, but they can be utilized on projects. So, all right. Again, they got to record this daily in Site Manager. It's not technically Site Manager. We use the Site Manager credentials. There is a separate traffic control program that our IT group created for us. So it's kind of separate from Site Manager. So when somebody says, traffic control diaries is down, that is a separate program. Site Manager should still be running. Sometimes when Site Manager down, that doesn't work because it uses your credentials and your contract authority from Site Manager. But if it is down, they are required to do a paper copy of the traffic control diary. Yes, sir.
You have a project, it's located within a parking lot off of the highway, all internal in the parking lot. Don't really find any details for traffic control in there other than using good judgment on segmenting off two-phase, half, north half, and south half.
Right.
Information you have that might be more detailed than what I found?
Probably not. I doubt that the MUTCD kind of pulls that out there. MUTCD is the Manual Uniform Traffic Control Devices for everybody else. And it kind of goes over, so our traffic control details are based off of the MUTCD. MUTCD is the bare minimum that you're supposed to have on a job. Our traffic control plans are typically a little more stringent than even what's in the MUTCD. But for like
for public roads.
Right. Parking lot is, yeah, it's, you would have to use judgment, or if you had a traffic specific plan within your plans for the parking lot, if somebody, the designer said, oh yeah, we're redoing this parking lot, and we're gonna phase it this way, so make sure you set up your cones for this or that. You know, that might be in there, but that'd be the only, I think, thing you could do. All right,
You be the scallywags.
back to the beginning. So traffic control supervisor is provided by the contractor.
True.
Oh, come on, there we go.
Right.
True. All right. So QA, QC, quality assurance, quality control. You know, district lab coordinator will assist in developing a sampling plan. Some ESA said that they will create it. Others say it's the entity's responsibility. So, you know, make sure you're taking a look at that. We're trying to push that. Again, District 2 and 8, the district lab engineer typically does the sample plan, but anywhere else, it's usually the project engineer that's responsible for doing that. But they can assist. I know Jason Davis is going to go over this more in a little bit, but be aware of the QA, QC. Quality assurance is what you're responsible for. That's the sampling and testing that the entity, the CE&I consultant does. Quality control is what the contractor performs. So kind of know the difference there too. They're supposed to have a QC person. You know, a lot of times, for example, embankment, the QC person's doing their own density test. They say, all right, we think it's good. They go contact the inspector. The inspector goes to do the QA test to verify that, yes, they did reach density on their embankment. All right, that was everything with project setup. Congratulations, we now made it to the pre-con. So, who attends the pre-con? All those same people, plus now we've invited the contractor. When you send out the invite to the contractor, make sure he's notifying any subcontractors that he already has on board so they can be attending. If you know you've got utility issues on the job, make sure we invite the utility rep for that, you know, AT&T, Energy, whomever. Sometimes they show, sometimes they don't, but it's nice to have, you know, at least invite them to make sure they're available. So again, you know, key personnel. So the topics we're going to go over, you're going to go through that pre-con checklist. So it goes over all the contract details, you know, contract time, any, like I mentioned before, lane closure restrictions, you know, project-specific things that you need to go over. Where are you getting your embankment from? You know, do you have a dirt pit? You're disposing of this stuff. Where are you disposing of any removal items? All that sort of stuff. Very important thing, NTP date. So when y'all send that NTP out, make sure that Venice and Val and our office are included on that notice to proceed so we can get that put in the site manager. A lot of times what ends up happening, your project is active in site manager. You're doing daily work reports and you get to that first estimate time period and you go to try to generate it and you absolutely can't generate it. It's because that NTP date wasn't input into site manager. This has to be in there so that the program knows, you know, all right, this is the day that my contract started, so I know this is my start date for my estimate, and then you set what the end date is for that estimate, but that's kind of the trigger for it. This is where you'll get, or should get, the construction schedule from your contractor, so make sure you review and approve that. Review their TCS certification, make sure that is not expired. Again, that's every 4 years that you got to get recertified in TCS. I believe mine actually runs out here in November, so I got to take it again. Or I don't have to take it, but I'm going to take it because it's, you know, just good to have it as a refresher. So construction, again, the coordinator over on our side, they're there to help the LPA project engineer, CE&I consultant, and the responsible charge. But, you know, it's still ultimately your project. You need to be aware of what's going on your job, where you're at, you know, with testing, pay estimates, change orders, all those things that are, you know, make sure they're being submitted correctly, timely, all that. All right. So.
Barnacles. Road 2.
Contractors are responsible for obtaining all the necessary materials, material samples. I hear
Make you think,
kind of a false. Let's see.
what do you think?
All right, I'm gonna go with the first
Some
one.
people
So.
said false.
All right, so false is correct. The contractor is not responsible for getting the material samples. That's on the inspector, that's on the project engineer to make sure you're getting the samples. The contractor is responsible for getting you any CCs, CAs, CDs. Those are the certificates that go along with, say, pipe or liquid asphalt, things like that. CD, certificate of delivery, CC, certificate of compliance, CA, certificate of analysis. Those are things that come typically from the vendor, the material supplier, that say, yes, this meet all the requirements of DOTD's specifications. So pipe, concrete pipe, for instance, is a CD. They'll have a certificate of delivery, and they'll say, yes, and then it has 300 feet of pipe, 24-inch concrete pipe on that CD. Well, if you've got 500 feet of 24-inch pipe that were installed, and you've only got one CD for 300 feet, you need to go back to your contractor and say, I need another CD for this 200 feet that's missing, whether it's one CD, two CDs, whatever. Be aware of that as well.
So the district lab will be responsible for that material sample, right? Our district lab.
What's that? The
Our
district?
district lab will be responsible for the material samples.
No. The PE and inspector are responsible for the samples. They take them to the lab. The lab is responsible for the tests. So
If
they'll
the district lab is doing your sampling and testing, they may not.
test it. Yeah.
Your entity state agreement might say that the entity has to hire a certified lab. Because DOTD may not have time to do the sampling on, or the testing on LPA projects. These all be decided before that construction project starts. Yes?
So in a situation with third parties testing, engineer and inspector would be responsible to ensure that they are on site taking the sample.
Right. That's if you're putting that on the certified lab. Again, typically, we take the samples. So, or when I say we, I mean the inspector, the PE, they're out there, they're taking the sample. So if it's a dirt sample, if it's a, aggregate sample, whatever, they go and actually physically get the sample, then they take it to the lab. It might be that, yes, as part of your contract, you say, lab, I want y'all to go to the concrete plant to check their stockpile and get the, gradation samples or whatever. That's up to y'all. But ultimately, responsibility of the CE&I consultant to make sure that sample gets done. Whether y'all put it back on your certified lab or whomever. But typically the district labs do not come out and collect samples specifically. It's the inspectors that end up doing that. All right, so the LPA PE, your CE&I consultant, what is their responsibility? They're, again, to administer the project, so they got to make sure everything's built in accordance with the plans and specs. So they need to be familiar with everything that's in there, special provisions, all that information. Make sure all documentation follows the construction administration manual. They've got to make sure that estimates get done timely, correctly, change orders get processed timely and correctly. Bid items need to be measured properly. Don't be going out there and we put down, 57 cubic yards of concrete. Well, it wasn't a cubic yard item, it was a square yard item, so you might have to go back out and, figure up, oh yeah, it was a 8-inch deep patch, but it's based on square yards because we already had the depth in there in that item. So make sure you're aware of those. Again, down here in the bottom, kind of highlighted, detailed estimate must be prepared monthly. So every 30 days, again, we're making sure we are paying every 30 days. We also put in here whether work is performed or not. That's because Yes, you might have a zero estimate in between there, but some of our pay adjustments are based on, the estimate period. So say you did an estimate for 3 months because the first 2 months they didn't do any work. That third month they did asphalt. Well, when you do the estimate, it's looking at that first month time period for the pay adjustment portion. So like your asphalt and fuel adjustment would be based on the pricing for the first month rather than the third month. So that's why we want to do it every 30 days to make sure we don't run into some of those pay adjustment issues at the end. Again, the PE is responsible for all samples and field tests. So again, visual inspections, density tests that are technically field tests, and the lab's not performing that, the inspectors are. Everything's done in accordance with the sampling manual, making sure all forms for the DBE are submitted on time and in compliance. You'll probably hear later on about CUFs, commercially useful function. You got to make sure that the DBE is performing the work that they are required to do, that they didn't just, on paper get hired, but really the prime consultant is doing all the work. Y'all got to verify that sort of stuff. Our project coordinator, their task is to make periodic inspections of the work. So they're not going to be out there every day. They're just going to check on it every so often, maybe drive through, make sure traffic control is upright. Yep, they're moving the project along, that sort of thing. They'll back check your documentation, making sure, yep, they're doing daily work reports. Yes, the estimates are being processed. Yes, change orders are being processed. That's, kind of their responsibility. We are providing similar oversight that FHWA does for us on our jobs. They're not out there all the time. They come through every now and then. They say, all right, I want to see your change orders for this project. I want to see your documentation for this, that sort of thing, just to kind of spot check us, make sure we're, performing the way we're supposed to be performing, that we're making sure everything's done in accordance with the plans and specifications. So, again, our person is not going to tell the contractor he's doing something incorrectly. We don't hold that contract, so we're not going to tell your contractor he's performing something incorrectly. We will tell you, who we then expect to go out and tell contractor, hey, you're not doing this correctly, get it corrected. Again, we're going to review the estimates and site manager. You got to notify them they're not in the approval chain, so just let them know, hey, we did estimate 1, we did estimate 2, that sort of thing, so they can check it. They are in the approval for change orders. So any change order you do, there should be a DOTD approver in there. Again, not that we're approving the change order itself, we're just making sure that yes, the dollars are being spent in accordance with CFRs. We're following all federal regulations, things like that. That's what we're checking, because what we don't want is for FHWA to come back and say, no, that shouldn't have been done that way. We're going to take those dollars back. You owe us that federal share, because then we're going to turn around and go, all right, entity, y'all owe us that federal share portion. So nobody wants to do that. I haven't really heard of it being done ever, but just be aware that's always an option. It's in your entity state agreement. If something's not done in accordance with the plan specs and requirements, we can take those federal dollars back. We can, FHWA can. So again, we'll let you know of any deficiencies, and then they're there to provide technical assistance and answer any questions you might have. Again, they're not there to do all the paperwork for you, but if you're having trouble with a change order, certainly, contact your project coordinator. Hey, it's been a while since I did this. Which box am I supposed to check? Which box am I not supposed to check? All that sort of stuff, and I'll kind of get into some of that in the second session. Construction documentation. Make sure you're doing your daily work reports and diaries. It should be for every day after the notice to proceed until final acceptance. Should be doing a diary, whether no work was performed, it was a weekend, whatever, to put down, whether or not, you're gonna charge that day, not charge that day. And again, you gotta look at whether it's a working day project or a calendar day project, a lot of different things that go into it, but again, starts at notice to proceed. Make sure they're thorough. So again, your daily work report is what you're saying went on the job for that day. So garbage in, garbage out. If you're not providing much information and there ends up being a claim or an issue later on and we got to go back and look at those and there's not enough detailed information, he who has the most documentation wins. And therefore, it might be that the contractor had more documentation. No, I had all these pieces of equipment out there, I had these people out there, all that sort of stuff. So make sure, we're documenting everything properly and that it's project specific. We don't want, man, that guy was mean, anything like that. Don't put that stuff in the daily work reports. That's, an opinion. It's not factual enough. He cursed you. You can say, yes, he cursed me. But, no sort of, feeling stuff in there. All right.
It is Shellback's turn, my favorite team.
All right.
I might give you 2 chips. You
So,
know.
I literally just said this, so definitely shouldn't get this wrong. So, failure to require, to supply the required documentation could result in either delay in reimbursement or possible withdrawal of federal funds.
Correct.
True. I mean, yeah.
But you guys would be shocked at how often this happens. It's crazy, isn't it, Matt?
Yes.
Okay, we have a big problem right now. We have all the construction projects that there's no final documentation for. So,
And we're going to
Now
ask a
you know.
lot of questions.
now
if
you
it-
guys know.
Yeah, we've had some coming through that they're trying to final out the projects and the sampling and testing information is missing. Well, where did it go? Who got paid for this? Because there should have been some kind of sampling and testing, Did Katrina blow it away? I mean, we can't still be doing Katrina, right? That was 2005. So what happened to the documentation? So again, to tie on that again, if you're not doing the proper documentation, federal funds can be withheld. I can't say that enough. Nobody wants that to happen. Y'all don't want it to happen. We don't want it to happen. FHWA doesn't want it to happen. But if somebody's not performing their job and is just, blatant neglect, probably having that taken out, so. All right, measurement of work, again, on a daily basis, checking all these things to make sure we're keeping up with quantities. What we don't want is at the end of the week, you go back out and try to measure everything that the contractor did. Invariably, you're gonna miss something. Contractor's gonna be mad because on the pay estimate, now he's missing certain quantities, whatever. Make sure, keeping up with that daily so that we don't get behind. And then the next question is that urchins?
Yes, sorry.
All right, so the LPA is responsible by law for paying the contractor on time, and the payment is due within 30 days. So I've only said that, how many times now? Like I said, I'm gonna repeat, so that hopefully we get that in there.
Matt, does anyone still do paper field books and spreadsheets, or are we required as LPA, CE&I consultants to use Headlight?
It should be in the entity state agreements now to utilize Headlight, but it might still be, most people don't use the written field books anymore. If anything, it's just a spreadsheet that they might utilize to put quantities in. But yeah, we're going to Headlight full bore now. So, some of these entity state agreements are 5-6 years old because you signed it back before we even started doing Headlight, but any new ESAs should have that requirement in there. And I think we even changed it to say not just you will do site manager or you will do Headlight, but it's you will utilize the department construction software, something like that, generic, so that if for whatever reason we changed it in the future, hey, this is what you got to use. You got to use the software that we use.
What starts in 30 days? Is it the end of the month or after all approvals have been received?
Yeah, it's the end of the payment period. So if, like I said before, if you set it, the 30th of each month or the 15th of each month, whatever, you got 30 days after that to get them paid. So, sometimes that takes a little while. I'll kind of go over that. I know Venice goes over that as well, because based on all the paperwork you got to do with a reimbursement or a disbursement, some of that can take a while. You got contractor payrolls that get inserted in there. You've got funding specific issues that can be inserted in there. So again, the sooner you do it after that, period ends, when you're saying, all right, this is the cutoff for our pay estimate, is going to be whatever date, then you got 30 days from there to pay them.
But the partial estimate period begins with the NTP, right? So the NTP is on the 15th, the partial estimate period would be 15th to 15th.
Yes and no. So that first estimate, technically by law, we've got 60 days on the first estimate to pay. But yeah, usually everybody does every 30 days. Actually, it might even be 90. I'd have to go back and check the law. But typically, I haven't ever seen one that, usually everybody is doing it every 30 days just to get in that habit. 30 days, 30 days, 30 days, doing estimates,
Denise is gonna tell you 30 days.
Right.
You know she is.
Yes. All right, so each month, you're going into Site Manager to create your estimate for now, until we go to Headlight. And then you'll just go into Headlight to generate it every 30 days. But once it's been approved by everybody in the chain, the entity will be issued the reimbursement or disbursement check based on the paperwork that was involved, that sort of thing, because that last approval step is Venice's group, and they're going to make sure that all that documentation is there. Again, if it's a reimbursement, the canceled check from where you've already paid them. If it's a disbursement, the canceled check from previous estimates have to be in there, that sort of thing. So make sure all that documentation is there, because that can hold up estimates as well. About the 8th or 9th time, entity is responsible by law for paying the contractor on time every 30 days. So again, just because something might get held up because paperwork wasn't included in there, you're still responsible for paying them every 30 days. Still supposed to get that out. Change orders, any changes, to the plans, to the specs, require a change order. The PE is responsible for writing those change orders and submitting them for approval. You must have a DOTD approver on there, again, so they can make sure, yes, it is something that is reimbursable by FHWA. If it's something entity specific, we wanted, this new cute little sign or something like that, no, that's non-participating. That's got to be full, city funds, whatever. You can still do it via change order, but it might not be participating. So that's what we're checking. That's why we're included on that approval chain. All right, final estimates. Final estimate package. This is, the closeout side, which is, we're getting into. So, within 30 days of the final acceptance, needs to include the 2059, the completed final estimate, as-built drawings, all these different things. Chris Durbin will go over this in full detail later, but just know that there's a bunch of documentation that's required. We've got 30 days here. It's either 30 or 60 based on the contract value, but I don't know that a lot of, they might start being more. The cutoff is $2.5 million. So if it's $2.5 million less, you got 30 days to get the final paperwork in. If it's over $2.5 million, you got 60 days. So just be aware of that as well. So change orders, pay estimates, all this. The entity is listed as the contractor. So we are listed as the owner because we are paying y'all the federal money. So that's why y'all are listed as the contractor. Site manager can only take one prime contractor, so that's why we list the LPA, because that's who we're sending the funds to. That's how that system works, so that's why we got to do it that way. The prime contractor is actually not listed in site manager, so it gets kind of confusing. So when you're doing your daily work reports and the prime contractor is doing the work, you know, if you're Baton Rouge, you're going to list Baton Rouge as the prime contractor. If it's a subcontractor, the subcontractors will be listed once they're approved, so you can, you know, assign them as having done the work. But the prime contractor, when they do the work, assign the entity as that prime contractor. Now, we still do need to get the contractor's concurrence, the actual prime contractor. So when you do that change order, you get it into draft, you get all the stuff ready to set it to pending, send that to the contractor for him to sign so that we have that, and then we can scan that document in as an attachment that, yes, the contractor did approve this plan change. And we can attach that as, you know, attachment to the change order. All right, I mentioned this before, but again, repetition. A DOTD representative always needs to be on change order as an approver. So make sure that that's included on there. Mentioned this before as well. The ATM was the 2059. Again, it's just the audit at the end of the job that says what all testing went on, that yes, we got all the correct samples that we needed. All the testing was good. We didn't have any failing samples, or if we did have failing samples, we either tested this again, or you know, you got to give a disposition of what you did with that failing sample. Was it used? Was it left in place with a pay deduct? Whatever the case may be, you got to kind of spell that out. All right, I don't know whose question we're at, but
We're at the Scalawags.
all right. Is an owner representative required to be on the job site when the contractor is working on a pay item?
Scalawag, you agree?
Yes.
Yes, correct.
That is correct. All right.
What if
Next.
they don't feel like going out there? What if they
You got-
say, oh, I trust that contractor, they're gonna do good, they're gonna measure it,
You can-
they're gonna put that pipe in, and they're gonna cover it up, and it's all gonna be good, I don't have to look at it.
Trust but verify.
There we go.
You can trust them, but you still got to verify. So you need to be out there to verify they're doing it correctly. All right. Next question is, you know, is the DOTD coordinator required to be in the field every day for the project?
Correct.
No, that is correct. All right. So again, we're repeating this over again, but the coordinator makes periodic visits. They're verifying that the DBE work, the information is correct, the estimates are correct. You know, if they need to, if you need some help, they can show you how to do the payroll review. They're not to do it, but they can kind of show you how to do it, because CRNL is fairly new. Attend any meetings requested by the responsible charge or the CE&I project engineer. But again, not not required to be on the job every day. Not our project, but your project, so be aware of those. Again, the responsible charge, they need to know what's going on in their project. They need to know the scope. They need to know where you're at. You know, how far along you are with time, how far along you are with construction progress. They don't have to be out in the field every day either, but they need to be contacting their CE&I consultant just to be up to date. Hey, where are we at with this? Hey, I drove by, you know, saw that they were working. How far along are we? Make sure, you know, you're aware of what's going on your project. Claims. So we have kind of changed up the claims process slightly. If you have a project coming out, you know, after, I believe it was July when we changed the specification, we've actually taken the verbiage out that referenced this EDSM, this EDSM 31128, and it's now just in the spec itself. So rather than, everybody loves going to a document and it says, oh, go see this other document. You go to that document and it goes, oh, see this other document. And you do this about 3 times. So in order to kind of cut out some of that, we just included the verbiage from the EDSM into the specification itself. So know that, the DOTD changed the claims process. Remember, again, this is your project. So if you end up getting a claim, you can send it up to headquarters for us to review, but we are just going to give you a recommendation because, again, it's not our contract. So we'll tell you, we'll review it, we'll take a look at it, we'll say, all right, yeah, I see the contractor side, yeah, I see y'all's side. Typically, this is how DOTD would handle it, and we'll provide that as a recommendation, but it's ultimately up to y'all whether to incorporate that recommendation or not. It's an opinion. You're not, held to it. We might say pay them a portion of it. We might say, nope, we agree with y'all, pay none of it, whatever the case may be, but just know that we'll provide an opinion, but it's up to y'all to, resolve the issue. Let's see. Again, requirement, not an option. I don't know how many times I've said this now as well, but we're going to hammer this into y'all. Documentation is required. If it's not in there, could cost the federal dollars. So,
It is the showback's turn.
all right. So we've talked about the inspector being out there every day. We've talked about the project coordinator being out there every day. Now, is the responsible charge required to be in the field every day for the project? No, that is correct. All right, we're almost to the end, and then I think we take a break. So project closeout. All right, so again, our project coordinator will help the PE get that closeout documentation correct. There's a checklist. You'll go through it. You'll put all your documentation together. Then you'll get with the project coordinator and say, all right, I think I have everything. Can you take a look at it? Does it look like everything is there? And, certainly we'll be happy to take a look at it. Yeah, it looks like everything is there. Go on and you can submit it to Baton Rouge. As part of this, you have to do a final inspection. So you got to go out there, go over the whole project, make sure everything, has been taken care of. Yep, everything looks good. You've invited the contractor, you've invited, responsible charge needs to be there. Invited the project coordinator or the construction coordinator. Everybody goes out, takes a look. Yeah, it looks like it's done. This is a very important step right here. The final acceptance from the entity. So we need something from the entity saying that they accept it. If that's the mayor signing a letter, if that's the city council or the parish police jury or whomever, if they've got to vote on a resolution or whatever the case may be, that needs to get, put on the agenda for any city council meetings or anything like that. Whatever the process is for your specific entity, we need that final acceptance from the entity. That's part of the closeout documents. So sometimes that's missing. We've got the final inspection done. We've gone through, we've got all the paperwork, all that sampling and testing was done, all the pay estimates are completed, all that, but we're missing that acceptance from the entity. Make sure that's in there, otherwise we can't accept the documents to do the final audit. We got to have something saying, yep, we're good with the project, thank you for our federal dollars, we used them properly, everything looks great. So, yes?
So if the mayor signs a notice of acceptance form or a letter to the contractor, it says it must pass the resolution. If that's not the standard process.
Yeah, it's whatever, it's whatever the entity's requirements are. Some allow for the mayor to sign things, others, the city council has to do it. So it's just whatever the process is for that entity. All right, so the LPA PE, again, they're notifying everybody of the project completion, they're scheduling the final inspection. preparing final estimates, and they will deliver all that to the project coordinator for review. Project coordinator will attend the final inspection, provide guidance, and then they'll review the backup documentation to make sure everything's in there before you try to send it to April, who's our gatekeeper at headquarters, because then she'll go through it and go, no, you're missing this document, this document, this document. It goes back to y'all until you get that turned back in. So, we try not to accept those documents because, we all have time frames. I'm sure y'all have pulled up to the window at Burger King or whatever, and they go, oh no, can you back up? But you started my time frame. I can't be getting dinged on, how quickly I get my food out to you. Same sort of thing there. If y'all send that in, we have so many days to turn an audit around. But if we don't have everything and we're waiting on that documentation, then that looks, dings us and says we didn't do things properly. We get hit by legislative audit. FHWA might review it and say, yeah, y'all didn't review these things in a timely manner. Well, we were waiting on, whomever from the city to get us our documentation. So just know it's not to be mean, it's not to be cruel, it's just, we all have bosses that look at these things and we get audited. Even audit gets audited. So as weird as that sounds. All right, so is it the responsibility of the DOTD project coordinator to prepare the final project estimate? And who was the urchins?
Urchins. Urchins trying to think.
All right, so no.
Might have cheated, it might be the showback's turn, I don't know.
Yeah. So I heard no, and the answer is no.
No, good
So
job.
that does it for this, the first session with me. Any questions on just the general contract admin overview stuff? Go ahead.
Why the special provisions take precedence over everything else?
Because somebody told me
Yeah,
that.
Lou Louie?
So that's been in the spec book as far back as I have looked, which is like in the 60s. Somebody decided that, the order of precedence is special provision is the kind of, I think the idea behind it was these are specific for your project. And so therefore it's the written detailed information of what needs to be done rather than a plan sheet, which, might have something incorrect and might, show something out of tolerance or something like that. But the spec, the special provision itself is that written, fully documented portion. So I think that's why it's above plans. And then of course it makes sense that plans is above supplemental, supplemental's above standard, and standards above the standard details. So, generally that makes sense. We have had even our own folks ask why, shouldn't plans supersede special provisions? But no, that's not the case.